Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Camera Rolling Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie, and today is episode 25, and I would just like a little round of applause because it's been a long time coming. I feel like it has taken a while to get to this place, like this position, much longer than it should have. I really wish that I could do an episode every week, but I just don't have the mental capacity to analyze films every week, and I also just don't want to put in filler type of stuff, if that makes sense, like just stuff to say stuff. That should be reserved for my YouTube channel only, in my opinion. So yeah, today we're here with actually kind of a fun, almost filler episode, if you will, because today I'm going to be talking about 15 different movies, and these movies are going to sound super random because they are movies that are for Mother's Day. And I know that Mother's Day, by the time I'm uploading this, will be yesterday, or at least it will have already passed, but I still think, you can celebrate your mother whenever you want to. And this list has some interesting films on it that I think there's something for everyone, okay? So of course the theme of this list is Mother's Day or some sort of like mother theme, whether it's relationship to your mom or you are a mother and like this is from more of that perspective. It was kind of hard to find movies that were specifically about motherhood that weren't scary that I had seen, because I do watch a lot of scary movies, and that's why the last half of this is going to be scary movies. But yeah, so let's get into these movies. Again, I think there will be something fun for everyone. The first movie is probably the most literal interpretation of this list, and that would be The Lost Daughter. This film was so good. I honestly, I've kind of forgot about it until I was looking through my Letterboxd, and I was like, wait a minute, I remember this film. I remember it being so good, and I remember thinking to myself, I can't imagine how this woman is feeling and encountering this situation. So this was a Netflix film, or a film that you could see on Netflix. It was released in 2021. It was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, which you can like definitely. I like Maggie Gyllenhaal. I think she's an interesting person in general, but she also wrote the screenplay, which makes a lot of this make sense. And I honestly feel like the main character kind of looks like her. The actress who plays the main character is Olivia Colman, and I think she does just an amazing job. This is considered to be a psychological drama because there's just a lot of psychological elements to it. This film is also based on a book of the same name by Elena Ferrante. So the film is surrounding this middle-aged professor named Letta on a vacation in Greece, and she ends up encountering sort of this family that has like an interesting sort of dynamic where you have this young mother named Nina who has a young child, a young girl named Elena, who loses her favorite doll while she's on the beach. And as Letta sort of encounters these people and sort of starts talking to them, you can tell that she's like very different from them in terms of like the way that like her demeanor, and also just like her, like culturally they're very different, where you get sort of this vibe that this family has a lot of money, and that they have a lot of power in the community because of this money and whatnot. And of course, Letta is just this outsider who's visiting. She's very quiet, very reserved. She's read a book on the beach type, whereas they are like drink and, have fun, running around kind of. Needless to say, when Letta encounters Nina, Nina sort of talks to her about how exhausted she is in taking care of her young daughter, and just like how much motherhood is kind of just messing with her head, right? And this reminds Letta of her time raising her daughter and how exhausted she was, and just sort of, we get a lot of flashbacks into the early years of Letta in her trying to raise her own daughter, and sort of her suffering with a postpartum depression that lasted much longer than just, a few months. So a lot of the film, and this film can be a little bit slow, but again, it's a psychological drama. Dramas tend to be a little bit slower when they are about very heavy topics, and this one in particular does have to do with, the postpartum feeling of depression and or just depression in general that can be heightened after having children. So if she already may have been experiencing those feelings beforehand, they were definitely more. And as she was raising her daughter, she ended up sort of becoming estranged from them because she took time away from them for years to get right, to because she was so overwhelmed. And of course her husband was like able to take care of them, but they're now, of course, like separated. They are now divorced because I think a lot of people expect, and I feel like this film has a lot to do with the expectations of women after having children or when they have children to be very happy and very excited and very grateful, and to not be able to express exhaustion and wanting to be your own person again and feel like an individual, because she admits that she enjoyed her time away from her kids. She was not sitting there feeling, sad necessarily that she was taking that time away from them. And I think that that is perfectly fine to do. I think that a lot of people, again, have this expectation that women aren't allowed to exist as individuals after having children, even though a lot of men continue to exist as individuals and are able to just leave if they want to. And a lot of men will leave and come back and still be considered to be a good father if they come back, right? And so with this estrangement, she really hasn't spoken to her daughters, but she does, again, have a lot of these memories that come up as she encounters this other family where she is witnessing this young mother and sort of her journey as, her daughter is missing her doll. And within this story, we find that Letta actually took the doll and was keeping it. And again, there's a lot of like symbolism in the actions of our main character. There's, a thing about peeling the orange. There's just a lot of these different elements of the film that have a much grander idea attached to them. And I won't spoil the ending. It's not necessarily like a surprise ending, but it's definitely one of those things where as you're watching it, it might surprise you a little bit. But also, I think this film just did a great job of expressing feelings and emotions that are valid, that continuously get invalidated for women. So if you are someone who has experienced this may be a very emotional film to watch. I know that I was kind of emotional, to be honest. I don't have children, but I was kind of emotional because even though my mom expresses, year after year how grateful she is to be a mother, I know that she's exhausted and she's tired, and that there's so many things she could have been doing with her life besides being my mom. And I both commend her for being a mom, but also I kind of feel bad because she didn't get to be all the things that she could have been outside of being a mom. And so seeing this film and seeing someone express this sort of emotion towards motherhood is really refreshing. And I often stray away from movies that specifically market themselves as this is a Netflix movie, this is a Hulu original, right? Because it feels like it's pandering a little bit, but this one is definitely one that you should clock in for. The second film is one that is extremely popular, and I honestly waited so long to see it, and this one has to do more with relationships to a mother, and this is the film Ladybird. I know a lot of people have seen this film. There's various criticisms of the film. There's, a lot of people who really love the film. I had mixed feelings about it because, like, it just didn't really hit on, like, my personal experience. But at the same time, there were elements and moments that I definitely connected with within the film. So Ladybird is a film that does focus more on the child in this aspect because it does follow Saoirse Ronan's character as a teenager in high school and sort of her difficult relationship with both her identity and also her mother, and sort of how her relationship with her mother is kind of shaping how she navigates discovering her own identity. And I think the mother-daughter relationship in this film is a really strong point that a lot of people often point out, even though it's not the main plot of the film. It is a coming of age, like, sort of comedy drama, so there's a lot of like teen angsty stuff in it, but there's also a lot of moments where you see her interacting with her mom, and some of the dialogue between the two is just very, very heavy. And again, I think it's a pretty good film. It's a 2017 film directed by Greta Gerwig, so you know it's gonna be good. There's not much else to say about this film in terms of plot because it very much is a coming-of-age film, and I feel like those films tend to follow the same sort of plot line where a teenager is sort of struggling with their identity and their relationships with people. Again, part of coming of age is experiencing new things, so usually romantic relationships, troubles with their friendships, and also their sort of struggle with their parents in trying to like fight them to be an individual while also knowing that you are under their roof and like you have to follow the rules and things like that. And especially because like she is a single mother, there's even more tension, I think, between the mother and daughter in this particular film. So yeah, if you're someone who understands sort of like teen angst, and like if you sort of had maybe a difficult relationship with your mom, and then I would definitely like recommend this film because it will make you cry probably. The next film is actually a pretty similar film, however, it does have some like different vibes to it, and it's the film LOL, or Laughing Out Loud. There is a French version and an English version. The English version has Miley Cyrus in it. Honestly, it's not a very good film, and I think a lot of what happens in the film makes a lot more sense in regard to French culture and just French people in general. Like, it makes a little more sense in that context. So, but the French one is a 2008 film directed by Lisa Azuelos, and it stars Sophie Marceau, Krista Terray, I don't know French, and Alexandre Astier. Again, this film is another sort of teen angsty film where there's sort of a weird relationship between the mother and the daughter, but there's a lot of tension there, and the film focuses sort of half and half on the daughter, navigating her romantic relationships and her friendships, as well as navigating her relationship with her mom, because the relationship is a little complicated and kind of weird because of her mother's relationship with her ex-husband, and sort of the relationships that the mother is building and trying to foster between being the parent who has to, and this is usually what ends up happening, is that if the parents are divorced, the mother is the like stricter one, where she has to like lay down the law, and the father sort of just gets to pop in whenever he feels like it to take people on trips, right? And so very much so, this film does focus on our main character, whose name is Lola, but they call her Lol. I think that's kind of dumb, but whatever. But yeah, there's just a lot of like difficult tension between the mother and daughter in this film just because of what the daughter wants to do versus what the mother wants to do, as well as there's like kind of a little bit of a twist that makes things a little complicated in relationship or in their relationship and whatnot. So yeah, it's a very interesting film, and again, I would recommend the French version more just because I feel like, again, it just culturally it just makes more sense. But you can watch the Miley Cyrus one. I have seen it. It's very angsty and kind of corny. The next film is probably the most obvious one that you would think of for a Mother's Day film, and this is one that you can probably watch with your mother, and it's also a musical, which I don't like musicals. Sorry to any of you out there who love musicals. I like musical movies, but I'm not a huge theater person. I don't know why. It never hit right with me. Anyway, the film is Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia is such a fun film in my opinion, but there are a lot of like strong female characters in this film. And for one, you've got Meryl Streep and Amanda Seyfried. But also, like, I don't know, it just, you just got some good, wholesome mother-daughter struggle. There's a lot of storylines in this film that are like going on at the same time. So like you have the daughter who's gonna get married and she doesn't know who her father is, and so she kind of sets out to figure out who that is. And at the same time she's like struggling with her mom because her mom's like, you don't need to know, it's fine, like let's move on, right? Like, you know, it's whatever, you're getting married, this is really exciting. At the same time, when she calls up all the people she thinks might be her father to show up for the wedding, her mom obviously is like taken aback because these are her past lovers. So that's uncomfortable. And of course, all of her friends who are like much older, they are all 50 plus. For one, serving looks. Two, serving voice. And three, there's, you know, the romantic interests in there of like the past love, sort of reconciling with that, but also there's just kind of like some girly giggly moments, and I love that too because there's no reason that women should not be girly giggly until our last breath, right? Like I feel like a lot of the times we forget that like after 50 or after 30, after 40, like you can still find love, you can still be serving looks. And I feel like this movie does a really good job of reminding us that like women still be women. The next film is for those of you who have kind of like overbearing mothers who will not stay out of your business, and that's the film Because I Said So. It's a 2007 rom-com, and this mother who has 3 daughters gets involved with her daughter's love life. Like she's trying to get her to fall in love and she just doesn't want to. It stars Diane Keaton and Mandy Moore, so like you know it's good. And this is one of those films where the mother wants something and she's like, I've got a plan, I'm gonna set her up with this person. When she tries to do that, it does not work out. Where she does not like the man's really that she sets her up with, but she does happen to fall in love with somebody who like just randomly shows up. Someone that her mom does not approve of. And so of course her mom, being the meddling woman that she is, tries to like put things in place to like, you know, push this man on her while also keeping the other man away. The next film is another classic comedy where mother and daughter just butt heads in the best way possible, and that is Freaky Friday. But of course, I think we can all agree that the best remake is the 2003 version with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis. And Chad Michael Murray's in it too, so, you know, and Mark Harmon. I don't know, there's a good lot of people in this. If you are unfamiliar, Freaky Friday is about a mother and teenage daughter who somehow magically switch bodies after going to a Chinese restaurant where they were arguing very loudly because they butt heads, okay? You've got a mother she's a therapist or a psychiatrist, I can't remember. Yeah, she's a psychiatrist, and she happens to be able to point out anything wrong with and help anything that is wrong with other people, but she can't quite figure it out in her own life. And she also has found a new man's long after her husband has passed, and so she's just trying to get back out there, be a normal woman, and she's got to keep things very in control. She likes to be in control. She likes things to be a certain way, and of course her daughter, being a teenager who is an aspiring rock band girly, does not fit her image really of what she wants to happen. Even though she supports her daughter being able to play music, it's more so a lot of the rebellious acts that she doesn't really like. So like trying to get piercings and tattoos and like dressing provocatively, which like if you are old enough, like if you're not a teenager anymore, you may as an adult be like, well, duh. Like these things don't seem unreasonable because like, if your daughter's a teenager, you know how teenagers are preyed upon by adult men. So of course you don't want your daughter dressing provocatively because like you don't want her ending up in a relationship with an older man who's only out for one thing, right? Like that makes sense to me as an adult. But as a kid and a teenager, I was like, why is her mom being this way? Just let her do whatever she wants. So it's very fun to watch this movie as you get older and throughout the years. Like rewatches are always so fun, and you get to notice little things. I love movies like body switch movies because they are so fun to see actors acting, right? Like Jamie Lee Curtis does so well in this role. I just love her in this role. Like she can hide from Michael Myers all she wants, but like this was it. And Lindsay Lohan, like in the height of her career, amazing. Great film. 2003 film, directed by Mark Waters, but the screenplay, of course, was written by women. And of course, it's based on Freaky Friday by Mary Rogers. So, classic tale of you gotta walk in somebody else's shoes to understand it. And this is such a great movie to watch with your mom because the whole time you can spend looking at your mom like... The next movie is actually one that you probably didn't expect, and I believe it's a DCOM, as in Disney Channel original movie. I don't know why, I always think it stands for something else, but this movie is Smart House. I know, this seems like a really random pick, but in Smart House, I feel like there is a significant motherly element to it that needs to be talked about. This movie is a 1999 film, and it is a DCOM, like I thought. It stars Ryan Merriman and Katie Sagal, or Segal, depends. I think it's Sagal, because it's not spelled like, Steven Seagal or something like that. The film was directed by LeVar Burton and written by William R. Hudson and Stu Krieger, so... It has men's involved, but I do think that this is a really good example of sort of how young boys and men view women and like mothers specifically, and I think this is a really interesting film. I know, it's a DCOM. You're like, this isn't that deep. It's not that deep, but seriously, when you think about it, it's about a boy who wins a contest and they end up getting a smart house. And in this case, 25 years ago, a smart house meant you could talk to your house, which is kind of actually how things are today, but it was like more. But in this case, even though we can sort of talk to our houses by being like, Siri, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what people have. I guess it's Alexa's, right? Needless to say, in this case, a smart house is literally one that like takes the data that it gets from your choices and whatnot, and it kind of like helps to customize your experience, so much so to the point that It like knows your every want and desire, which, sounds like a good idea at first, but because the main boy character is kind of looking for a replacement mom after his mom has passed, and also being sort of the pseudo mother figure because he does have a younger sister, but his dad's always busy. So he takes it upon himself, being the computer whiz that he is. He messes with the motherboard, per se. He messes with the computer within the house, and he gives it sort of this like traditional mom feature that gets way out of hand. And honestly, there are some moments in this movie that genuinely scared me as a child, but we won't talk about that. And I just think that this is a really interesting film that like dives into like if you are someone who grew up without a mother figure, or like the main character had your mother pass at a young age, you may understand the feeling that he is going through, where he wants a motherly figure, but he doesn't really want it to be someone else because his dad does kind of start dating this woman, but he doesn't want the woman to be his mother. Like, he's really against it, but he's all for the house being a motherly figure and someone who takes care of them and like is, emotionally supportive of them, because I think she's like this other entity instead of being like a literal person who's like an individual, right? And I just find it very interesting, and I really like it, and it's really sweet that like he wants to have a motherly figure, and just the way that that kind of manifests in a way that like isn't necessarily healthy. And I don't know, there's just a couple scenes where they like watch like some childhood footage of like them as like little with their mom, and it's just really sad. And I don't know, it's just a good movie, okay? Like, get your mom and cry about Smart House. And the last film about motherhood that I love, love, love because it has some of my favorite actresses in it, and it's just a good movie. Like, it hits on so many notes that I really like, and that is the film Mermaids. Mermaids is a 1990 film directed by Richard Benjamin, but it is written by June Roberts, and it stars Cher, like the Cher, Winona Ryder, and Christina Ricci, which I've always said Ricci. I've heard other people say Ricci. I always thought it was Ricci. Let me know. Let me know like what you call Miss Christina Ricci. And this is another film that is based on a book by Patty Dan. This film is set in the 60s in America, and it's a fun film. Like, honestly, it is so sweet and so fun, and there's just, I don't know, I just love the relationships in this film. So essentially a single mother, moves her children around a lot. She's kind of messy. She's always moving her kids around because she is getting in new relationships, and then those relationships don't work out, and so on and so forth. And so obviously moving around a lot can be really hard for a young teenager trying to figure out their identity, going from school to school, etc. And Winona Ryder's character is a teenager who falls deeply into religion because her mother's very messy, very free spirit, and in this case she wants to be the opposite. So usually you get like the strict mother, rebellious teenager, and this is the opposite. You get sort of this like free spirit mother and very like straight-laced sort of daughter. But of course her daughter is also a teenager and she has hormones, and so she's trying to deal with those like hormones of like wanting to be in a relationship, right? Or having like thoughts and feelings that maybe she just like doesn't think aligns with her religious beliefs, especially because she's very judgmental of her mother. And I just think that this is like, if you are on the other end of the spectrum of like your relationship with your mom, if you had a mom like this, you may very much like identify with Winona Ryder's character. And so I think this is just another good movie that's on the other end of the spectrum for those of you who just had a different experience with your mom. And I loved this film. Like there's just so much going on with it, and then little tiny Christina Ricci just having a good time wanting to swim and be a fish. So cute. So cute. Now let's get into some horror films, because that's probably what you came here for, right? So this film I've actually already talked about, and I can't remember if I talked about it in the psychological horror iceberg. I think I did. It may have come up on there, but it's the film You Are Not My Mother. This film is an Irish film from 2021. It was directed by Kate Dolan and written by Kate Dolan. And it's it's one of those films where someone disappears for a while, and then when they come back, they're very different from when they left. And in this case, it's her mother. Her mother was like driving her to school, and they get in sort of an argument. And when she comes back, she finds that her mother is missing. And when her mom comes back, she's very different. It's definitely a creepy little film. And of course, there are elements of like motherhood involved with it, because it's about her relationship with her mother. And again, I sort of mentioned this when I talked about it the first time, that there's this sort of generational, like, tradition type of vibe going on with it. So it's a very interesting film. I really liked the film, and I think it'd just be an interesting watch. The next film is one that I was very surprised to see from this person, but it was really good upon watching it, and it is the film False Positive. It's a horror film directed by John Lee. However, it was also written by Ilana Glazer. This one is a Hulu movie, and so again, I was like kind of skeptical, especially because Ilana Glazer, if you don't know, she is one of the writers and stars of Broad City, which is a comedy. Like, I mean, it's girly comedy. Like, it's such a good show. I love it, and every time I watch it I cry a little bit, because I think of my best friend and I'm like, that could have been us. If we lived in the same city, that would be us, right? Like, chaos. Needless to say, it was really weird and interesting to see, because she's also starring in this film, and it just was weird to see her in a role where it's a horror film, right? Where she's being a serious person. This film was really interesting because I think it explores the relationship that people have with motherhood, and it is scary, of course, a little bit scary, but it definitely explores that idea of how to go about motherhood, who to trust in your pregnancy and whatnot, because the main character has been trying to get pregnant for years with her husband, and they decide to go to a doctor to inseminate her, and when they do, she ends up with triplets, and so they decide to essentially terminate one or two of them in order to, make the pregnancy easier, right? Because if she's already having trouble getting pregnant, it means that she may have a very difficult pregnancy. So she has to sort of choose which child to keep, which in itself is a really difficult decision. And I think not only that being part of the film, but also there's a lot of, again, sort of she's going around trying to figure out how she feels about this situation, how she feels about being pregnant. And again, there's like supernatural elements to it. But yeah, there's like supernatural elements to it. There's sort of like some scary elements. If you had a tough pregnancy, or if pregnancy is scary to you, I wouldn't recommend, like, if you've had any trauma relating to pregnancy, I wouldn't recommend this film, because there is like a lot of sort of like scary stuff, and not just scary in the supernatural way, but like scary in the way that that pregnancy can be scary. The next film is a found footage film, and I can't remember if I talked about it when I talked about found footage films. I don't think that I did, but it's a 2012 film called The Devil Inside, and this one obviously has some supernatural religious elements to it. And you may be thinking, like, if you've seen it, you may be thinking, like, this isn't about motherhood necessarily. And that's true, but it does have to do with a daughter who will do anything to save her mother. Not only will she like do anything, but she also really just wants to figure out what's going on with her, because essentially in the film it's about a woman who years after her mother had been committed to a psychiatric hospital, more specifically one that was Catholic and in Rome, because she's possessed and she'd had multiple exorcisms and it seemed like nothing was really helping, and more specifically she was locked up because she committed some crimes while she was possessed. And so she really just wants to learn more about her mother, sort of where she came from, and it takes you on a wild, creepy, scary ride. But I definitely think that this idea of trying to like figure out more about yourself through understanding your parents is an important like element to this film. So I don't know why I put this film on here as a scary movie. It's not really a scary movie. So the next films are not necessarily scary movies, but they are like kind of like they're either thrillers or they're creepy or they have like a psychological element to them that can make them a little heavy or scary for people. So that's kind of like why they're on the bottom half of this list. But the next one is We Need to Talk About Kevin. It's a 2011 film. You've probably heard of it. It's a very popular film, partially because it has Tilda Swinton in it, but it also has Ezra Miller. And Miller tends to play roles that seem to align with who they sometimes are. They've been in the news, I feel like, in the past couple of years for doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And for honestly it seems like there's some mental illness happening there. But yeah, needless to say, Ezra Miller has been in a lot of films where I feel like they're playing themselves almost, or part of them playing these roles has made them into the person that they are. And this one in particular is about Ezra Miller playing a boy, so I'm gonna say his name is Kevin, and he is clearly like a sociopath of some sort. But it's about Tilda Swinton's character as a mother as well as this character Kevin, and Kevin is her son, and he's a difficult child. And I think that there's a lot of, is my child messed up? Like, am I raising a sociopath? You know, like, it's very much along those lines. So I think that's why this is considered to be like a psychological thriller, because there are some scenes that are like kind of like take you aback a little bit, but also it deals with the idea that like you as a mother don't really have as much control over what your child becomes as maybe you might think. And so I think that this film does kind of a good idea, or because I think that this film does a good job of sort of addressing that topic of, am I raising somebody that's going to be a bad person? Because at some point you kind of have to be like, I tried my hardest, but I can't stop them from being a bad person. You know, I can't stop them from hurting me and other people. So, yeah, there's just a lot of, like, manipulation and all that kind of stuff in it. So, if that interests you, it's also based on a novel, so. The next film is one that is probably, you may not think of it as one that's about motherhood, but I definitely feel like the elements that are at play, and also it just being inspired by the Bible, plays into that sort of creation idea of motherhood, and that would be the film Mother! Exclamation point. It's the 2017 film starring Jennifer Lawrence, the one. This film was very difficult for her to film, and I think a lot of people after seeing it were very perturbed, and honestly I was too. There's elements that are a little bit scary about it towards the end, but it's not like a horror film. It's just kind of scary. Like, it's kind of creepy, and it gives you a really hair standing up on the back of your neck feeling. It's about a woman who moved to this big country home out in a rural area, and as the main character, which they don't really have names in this film, but the main character played by Jennifer Lawrence, she is sort of struggling with like what's real and what's fake. She's sort of taking this medication, as well as her husband's acting kind of strange, and then this couple shows up, this like unknown couple shows up to their house, and things get even weirder, and there's a lot of boundaries that are crossed, and it's just very strange. And honestly, the way that these people act is kind of how it feels to be autistic, where people say and do things that make you uncomfortable and feel weird, and you're like, why are they doing this? I don't understand it, but they just do it anyway, and everyone just acts like it's normal. And it's like, what? I don't understand, like, why? So yeah, very interesting, very heavy film. Again, just sort of that like warning. I don't even know what to add as like a trigger warning, because it's just kind of like there's a lot of weird stuff happening, but also not at all. Yeah, I also sort of elect to not talk about films that I really haven't seen before or like don't know anything about, and so that's why this list may feel like sort of repeats of things maybe that you've heard in the past. And I say that because the next one is Silent Hill. It's the 2006 supernatural horror film based on the video game series of the same name. And after watching this film, it was very clear to me that there was like a mother element to it. There is, of course, like the parents. But the plot of this film is that a mother and father are dealing with their adopted child having a lot of nightmares and sleepwalking and things like that. And she mentions this place like Silent Hill. And so the mom does some research, and she wants to take the young girl to Silent Hill to hopefully maybe quell some of the sleepwalking and nightmares that she's having, to kind of like figure out what's going on with her daughter. And when she does that, her daughter ends up disappearing after a crash, and they end up in Silent Hill, but in this sort of like alternate universe that Silent Hill lives in, where she's going to find her daughter. And the father, he's stuck outside of Silent Hill, and so he's also trying to find her. But I think specifically in the movie, because I know that the video game is different, but in the movie there's a lot of focus on motherhood, and on like there's some religious elements, but I think especially the desire to find a daughter that she hasn't really known for that long is very like interesting, and I think kind of special about it. And I think that like any mother should be this way, whether it's their own child or not. Like, you should always be this like desperate to find your child, to like fight off these like creepy demon things. I don't know. It's a fun, scary little film. So if that interests you and you want like a little tiny little element of motherhood in there, then this would be a good movie. So this one is a sci-fi psychological thriller, so there's not a lot of like scary elements to it, but this is the 2004 film The Forgotten. This stars Julianne Moore, and this film, when I watched it, I was like, what? Wait, what? It was one of those films where you think you know what's going on, and then you actually just really don't. And I'm pretty sure this is that film where people get yeeted. And it's like, whoa, like someone gets yeeted, and it's like, I was not expecting that. So essentially, this woman who lost her son in a plane crash is continuing to grieve her son for what seems to be too long for her husband. And in grieving her son, at one point she finds that he is slowly disappearing both from photos and memories. It's like that episode of The Amazing World of Gumball where they realize that somebody's missing, there's a fold in the fabric of society, and they gotta go find Molly in the void, right? That's this film, okay? She knows that her son is real, but no one else seems to know that. And it starts this whole long investigation into where the heck everyone's memory's going, and also to prove that her son existed. And there's just a lot of twists and turns in this film that I didn't expect. And again, if you are someone who like has lost a child or is grieving, I wouldn't recommend it because it might be a little too much, but it is a very interesting film. Again, it deals with this idea of, you know, loss and motherhood, and I think sort of the strength and love that mothers have for their children that just seems to be never ending, whether they exist or not, you know? And I don't know, there's just something special about this film that besides the funny yeeting moments, which if you watch it, I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, I just found this film to be kind of endearing. So, but that is the final film that I wanted to talk about that I think would be on a list of movies that you could either watch with your mother or watch for Mother's Day, or has something to do with motherhood in general, whether it's your relationship with your mom or a woman's relationship with motherhood and her children, because I think that all of these films have some sort of theme related to motherhood. And some of them that seem like a bit of a reach, just know that like they don't put these things in the story or the movie for no reason. Like, you may be thinking like, Smart House, really? They put it in there for a reason. People lose their parents and they manifest things in very different ways. They cope in very different ways, right? So yeah, I think all of these films are really good films and really interesting films, so I would highly recommend pretty much all of them. I would say, I'm not going to say which one is my favorite because they all have very different places sort of like in my heart. But yeah, if you have a mother that you would like to celebrate this Mother's Day, then I think that some of these films would be great to watch with her. But if you just need a moment to cry about your mom, some of these films may also be for that. So yeah, I hope you guys are all having a good or had a good Mother's Day. And to any mothers that are out there, like, hopefully you feel loved and respected, and just know that you are an individual, that being a mother doesn't take that away from you, but it also gives you a new identity that a lot of people cherish and love very much. So I know that this can be kind of a tough time of the year for people because over the summer you've got Mother's Day and Father's Day like back to back, and so I know it can be a tough time for those of us who have difficult relationships with our parents, or if you are, you know, grieving a parent, or if you have a chosen family. But just know that, like, if you do have a chosen family, or there is someone in your life that you view in sort of a motherly or fatherly way, that those can still count too. That, like, this doesn't have to be a time where you are only focused on, you know, how frustrating it is that everyone gets to like celebrate their birth mother, when like everyone has such different situations. And you know, I think about my cats, and I know this is kind of like not the same thing, but I think about how I feel like I have a motherly role over my cats. And not to say, oh, I'm like a mother. I mean, in the sense that they have a loving figure who takes care of them and is there for them. And it's in a very different way than my cats are for each other, right? Like, they are not mothers to one another. Like, I am their mother to them. And so motherly figures can be in many different ways. And I just hope that we can celebrate all of the motherly figures that are out there. So, but that is all that I have for this episode. Let me know what you guys think down below. And with that, keep watching movies, and I'll see you guys in the next one.